flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, Secretary, call the roll.
Aiello.
Here.
Berry. Here. Casper.
Here.
Jackson.
Here.
Lloyd.
Here.
Nenza.
Here.
Malloy.
Here. Thank you, everyone, for coming out tonight. I apologize for having to cancel last week's meeting. We wanted to make sure everyone had a chance to come out and talk. So right now I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Stawick. He's going to give us a COVID-19 update.
Thanks, John. I want to draw everybody's attention to the slides up on the screen. I appreciate, as John said, everybody coming tonight and your patience with the reschedule. A few weeks ago, in a committee of the whole meeting, I expressed to the board the administration's recommendation to stay in the current hybrid program for the time being, and then reaffirmed that position at our regular meeting, which was just a day longer than 2 weeks ago. And quite a bit has changed since then. The metrics have changed. Our vaccination status has changed. Some of our neighboring school districts, their strategies have changed. And at the board's request, we've come together again to just review that recommendation and also whatever possibilities we might have. Vern, if I can get you to go to the second slide. This talks about our current reality. We began this school year full remote for all students. And then in November, we began offering families a choice for either hybrid or full remote. That began in November. And you'll recall, I want to just monologue a bit about this because right before the school year opened, we planned to come in person, and then in August decided that we needed to start full remote, and that required a good amount of rescheduling. There's a reason why principals do that type of work during the summer, because it's quite a bit of heavy lifting for a good amount of time, and they need to do that without distractions. They did that relatively real quickly so that we were able to open the school year full remote. And then at that second bullet in November, when we switched from all students being full remote to students having a choice between hybrid or full in person, there were a good number of full remote families that we heard from that expressed some dismay that the schedule of their full remote program was condensed and changed, and it was a bit of an adaptation. Of course, the students that started coming to the hybrid program, that was a big change for them as well. And I say on that third bullet that currently we have 60 staff that have accommodations. Some of those are for ADA health reasons, and some of them are due to our extension of FCCRA benefits to staff who have their own students, their own children in their home, whose either daycare or schools are not in session, and therefore they're in a childcare conundrum. And, that was a real serious factor along the way, trying to schedule everybody and give them the resources that they need to have successful programs with staff in a variety of different circumstances. And I think principals have done a really nice job, and staff have done a really nice job of rising to those occasions. That number 60 looks rather large and daunting, but I've got a good amount of good news about that too, is the FCCRA benefits sunsetting at the end of March, and with a good number of our staff receiving the vaccine now, even those with ADA accommodations, we've already started talking with them individually so that they can have conversations with their doctors about whether or not being vaccinated, relieves the need for those accommodations. So a good number of those 60 folks are going to be coming back in the next few weeks. I would say probably most of them. And the November change resulted in rescheduling of almost all students and a decrease in the length of day and format for full remote students. So I just want to give you a picture of what we've been through. And then Vern, the next slide, vaccination info. This is as of yesterday, but we've had a breakthrough in the last 24 hours where we found a private source in conjunction with District 230. And you see that third bullet, that's really the one that I've been keeping my eyes on. That's the number of staff unable to schedule a first vaccine. 75 is a good number, a large number, I should say, of staff that have a desire to get vaccinated and haven't been able to schedule that first dose. I suspect that when we survey staff again in the next day or two, that number is going to be much, much smaller, and we'll be on the road to full vaccination for those that want it. There's a good number of staff, 81 in that last bullet, that don't plan to get the vaccine, but they understand that they'll be choosing not to get the vaccine at their own risk. So I don't expect that them not being vaccinated should really impact our decision-making too much. So I'm looking forward to seeing what today's breakthrough does to the number in the third bullet. I suspect that number was cut in half or more this morning. And we've been sending out several rounds of communications to faculty and staff to make sure that they don't miss this opportunity. We want to make sure that everybody who wants a vaccine signs up before they run out of doses. So Marion Betley's been working very hard in doing that communication today. Vern, slide 4, please. So this is just a bar graph of our history of positive cases and close contact cases on campus. So this is student and staff side by side. And when it says positive cases on campus, you know that doesn't mean that they caught it on campus. It just means that there's students that come to campus that reported a positive test. And then you'll see in the second line, the close contact. Those are students and staff that needed to be quarantined because they were reported to be in close contact with someone who tested positive. And I'm happy to report that those numbers across the board have been very, very low for District 146. And, for a while there, I was just patting us on the back that I thought that was a result of our mitigation efforts. And I'm certain that it largely was. But I did a deep dive into positivity rates of districts that have been full in person because I wanted to see if there was a difference. And their number of cases were very low too. And I attributed that to how well they were doing the mitigation strategies that we've been doing. And perhaps proximity in the classroom, perhaps that's not as essential if we're doing all of the other things layered well. And there's a lot of criticism in the community. I don't mean our community, I guess I mean in American society, that say, well, if masks work, then why do we need to be 6 feet away? Or if being 6 feet away works, why do we have to wear a mask? Why do you need to take our temperature every day? Why do we have to report our health every day? Why are you close contact, contact tracing and quarantining and on and on and on and on? And the reason why we do all those things is because there is no one thing that's been identified to be foolproof in preventing the spread of the disease. So the idea is to layer a bunch of mitigation strategies on top of each other, and that resulting in a good amount of protection. So back to the other districts, their positivity rates are not much higher than ours, but their quarantine number due to close contacts are much higher. And they don't typically, I really haven't found a district that dashboards those the way we do, that's been open full in person anyway. But I've spoken to a number of the superintendents in those districts, and they report that there's a good number of, a much larger number of quarantine, obviously, because kids are sitting, more kids are sitting within 6 feet. So when somebody comes in positive, In District 146, they have 0 or 1 or sometimes 2 close contacts that need to quarantine. Well, districts that are full in person and that are only sitting a few feet apart, when a student comes into one of those districts and then finds out that they're positive, there's 6 or 7 or 8 or sometimes 10 or more students that have been in close contact with them that results in long quarantine. So I've got a nice case study in my own house because in Manteno, where I live, they've been full in person, except for a couple times where they had to shut down because of outbreaks. They've been full in person the whole time. And there were a couple times early in the school year where one or more of my kids were sent home as being a close contact, and they spent 14 days at home remote learning while their peers were full in person. And at the beginning, that didn't seem like that big of a deal until they came home actually positive in November, which resulted in other kids showing symptoms, and the time the doctors weren't recommending tests for siblings unless they were in some kind of health distress, and none of them were, thankfully. But it resulted in a long three-week plus total quarantine. And they went back to school. There was a pause after winter break, and when they resumed, now we're in quarantine again. It's the reason why I'm not with you in person tonight. So my students are in full day. They've been quarantined several times. One or more of them have been infected, different ones twice, which resulted in long periods of full remote learning for several weeks. So I asked my wife, Jenny, what would you prefer? Would you prefer that our kids were in school 2.5 hours a day, every day, and never got quarantined? Or do you prefer what they've been experiencing, which is full in person all year long, resulting in 2 or 3, for most kids, 2 or 3 quarantines, some of them lasting several weeks? And she just shook her head, and she couldn't answer. And the reason why she couldn't answer is because both of the options stink. It's just not, neither one of them is any good. So we have to remember that the objective is just to simply do the best we can for the most number of students and get through it. So fortunately, you're going to see later in the slide presentation is there's a good amount of light at the end of the tunnel, but I spend a good amount of my time reflecting on what we've done and what would I have done differently if I could go back, and what should we do now. And I hear from parents who say, I'm not ready to be back in person. I really need a rich, full remote program. And I hear from a good number of parents, I'm sure some of whom are in the audience tonight, that say, I need a full in-person option for my kid. Like, my kid's ready to go back, and we need them back in full person. And then in the last couple of weeks, since the letter went out, I heard from some hybrid families that say, if you go to full in person, that's going to be a difficult decision, because I'm confident sending my kids to school in hybrid because there's a good amount of distance between them and other kids, and I'm not sure whether or not I'm comfortable to send them to a full classroom. So it's an interesting position that we're in. And I think it was Kim Hartnett. Kim, I know you're listening, so a little shout out to you. She said in an ad council meeting early last week, and I wish we could just do all 3. I wish that there was some way we could do all 3. And that's been our motivation all along, is to try and give everybody what they want, because we understand that there's a good number of people that say 500,000 people in the United States have died from this disease. I want to stay far, far away from it. And others that say, I'm really not afraid of this disease, or we've already had it, or we've already been vaccinated, and we want my kids in full. And then some people that say, I want my kids to get a taste as much as they can get, but they need to have a lot of space around them in order for me to feel comfortable. And it's just a matter of us having finite resources, finite numbers of classrooms, finite numbers of teachers, and how do we use those strategically to get the most number of people the best service in the manner that they want to. So that's been the challenge all along. That's been the nature of the challenge all along. And we've got some more we've got some more decisions to make about how to move those chess pieces and get the right mix of options for our folks. And I also want to, before I move too far on from my personal story, I will say that in Manteno, the reason why full in person or full remote has worked is they're doing what I keep calling simulcasting. I can't think of another better way to say it, but they've got teachers in classrooms in front of kids in every room in their school buildings, and then full remote kids that are assigned to that teacher remote into that live instruction and witness it in real time. Now, the upside of that is they don't need to change teachers to do that. There's a lot of good about that. The downside is it's not nearly as interactive as the type of remote learning we've been doing, where a remote teacher is on a Zoom with kids that are all remote, and it's interactive. The teacher sees little boxes light up, and she can ask students questions, and students can raise their hand, and individual students can raise their hand and ask questions, and it's much more attentive and it's much more two-way, whereas a simulcast is much more one-way. The teacher's teaching to the students in her classroom. She understands that the remote students are a fly in the wall of that room, and then she does the best she can to provide them support or answer questions somehow during the instruction or after. And I've been blessed with 6 outstanding students, so my students are quite successful in that environment. So while simulcasting has been unpopular as an option in 146, and it isn't as rich since it's less interactive than full remote Zoom sessions, it has worked okay for my kids. So I think if we decided to use that method in order to bring kids back, you're going to have a good amount of disappointment from your full remote students in the quality of their full remote learning. And we'll know how, and probably a good amount of dissatisfaction from teachers who are used to giving their remote students a much more intimate classroom experience via Zoom. But we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Vern, I'm ready for the next slide. So I included this information from surrounding districts, and one more district has changed to full in person since we published it. I'm pretty sure that in the letter it said that we had 5 districts in South Cook County that are full in person. Well, there's 6 now. I don't know if another one changed to that or if one of the districts finally filled out the regional offices survey. But the reason why I do that is not necessarily to compare us to other districts, because the reason why I think the state and ISB and the CDC and the IDPH have produced guidelines and not rules and left the decisions about how to structure school up to local school boards is because they understand that everybody's situation is different. And, you know, when you talk to some of these districts that have been full remote all along, they're deciding whether or not to dip their toe into the hybrid pool after spring break. So it's just really interesting how the culture of each school district is different. I want to talk a little bit about the last line of this slide where it says planning to come back in person, because we've got 4 adjacent school districts that I want to just kind of lay it on you, just so you can just get a picture. So 135 is currently on 2 different schedules, one for K-5 and another for junior high students. Currently, their K-5 students come in every day for 5 hours. They go home and eat lunch, and then they log in remotely for their specials. Currently, the junior high students are on an A-B schedule where they come in 2 days a week with an alternating 3rd day every other week. They do the same for K-5, come in for 5 hours, go home and eat, and then log on for the remote portion of their day. As of April 19th or maybe April 12th, they haven't picked a hard date yet, they'll change the junior high schedule only. So the kids come all 5 days a week for 5 hours a day and then go home to eat lunch in the remote portion of the day. The K-5 schedule will not change in April. They feel all of their teachers should be vaccinated by the end of March, and they've got a private vaccine provider. However, they feel that serving lunch for kids is still a potential risk, so they're avoiding that. Whereas District 140 is trying, they don't have a private source until now. They've got the same private source that we do through Andrew. But as of the writing of this slide, they're trying to get vaccines just the same as we were. And when they made their decision, they were kind of in the same boat that we were a couple days ago, just not really sure how fast they could get vaccinated, where those vaccines were coming from. They believe that the majority of their teachers should be vaccinated by April, so they will be going full in person as of April 7th. Elementary schools have 2 lunch periods. They're going to be adding a 3rd lunch period. They're going to be using the gym, the commons, the cafeteria or hallways, anywhere that they can find room to feed them, because they feel like it's important to have lunch so they can have longer than a 5-hour school day. They're going to be following a 3 to 4 foot distance rule, and they'll still be wearing masks and doing all the other mitigating things. District 142, they have a 5-phase approach to returning to school. Their phase 4 plan, which we're in right now, calls for an increase of classroom student ratios. Monday through Friday, all in-person hybrid learners, they've got 2 groups, A and B, return to school on a shortened daily schedule, and fully remote learners stay remote. So 1/3 of their students are fully remote. The rest are in a hybrid 2-3-3-2, similar to what I described for the junior high in 135. They're talking about going 5 days a week, but if they do that, they're going to be doing it for 4 hours a day after spring break for the in-person learners, so that they don't have to serve lunch. And then 145 is really interesting. I'm going to read you what I wrote so I don't miss anything, but then I'm not sure if it's in here or not. I want to talk a little bit more about that. Their 3rd trimester starts March 1st. They're surveying parents right now on whether they want their student to receive remote instruction on site, or whether they want their student to receive remote instruction from home. Right now, they're remote learning for all students, but 500 of their 1,200 students come in person to the school to receive their remote learning. So they're there all day. They're distanced 6 feet, but they're still in front of a computer getting their instruction. So you really should consider them a full remote district. They've just brought 40% of their kids in person, and that's, I think, been really really helpful to their families who have trouble with finding childcare. So, but then 700 of their students are still at home receiving their full remote instruction from home. So it sounds like for 3rd trimester, they're considering re-offering the in-person full remote, so that people from that 700 who need to get back in the school building can be added to that 500. And if they do that, obviously the distance between students will have to go down, or there's going to be some other exchange for that. So I just wanted to give you a taste. There's as many different models out there as there are districts, but I'm encouraged by relatively low positivity rates, even in the districts that are full in-person. What is troubling to parents in those districts is the amount and length and number of quarantines, where students are sent home for 14 days at a time because they were a close contact. If you fill the classroom, there's just simply going to be a lot more of that. And there's really no good way, unless you're doing simulcasting, for those kids to bounce between full in-person and full remote. And if you're simulcasting, that's easy, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's good, because the quality of the instruction is different and I would say less rich. Vern, let's go to slide 6. So these are those mitigation strategies. You guys all know that we're doing all these things, that we are going to continue doing all those things no matter what program we use. I put this in the slideshow just so folks who aren't watching this live or don't watch the recording, if all they do is look at the slides, I wanted to give them a taste of what we're doing to mitigate risk and what we're attributing our low infectious rate and our low quarantine rate to. All right, Vern, slide 7. So this is really probably too small on your screen to be usable to you, but I just wanted to point out that it exists. With the new CDC guidelines for mitigation, they put out a whole new document, but you may not be interested in the whole document. You may be interested in this 2-page summary. So I don't know if you're looking at this slide presentation at home or after the meeting or someday down the road, if you'll be able to stretch those enough to actually read them. So we put a link at the very top underneath the heading there. So as a subtitle, and that link is live. So if you go into our presentation and click it, you should be able to, it should take you right there for all the new information. And I want to point out that several times in the CDC guidelines, it said that schools tend to not be super spreaders. The objective is to get kids back in school. And actually, when I was reading the introduction, I thought, wow, they're saying that they're saying that we need to come back. And then, Vern, if you go to the next slide, these are the indicators and thresholds. So there's 2 indicators now. One is cases per 100,000, and then the other is positivity rate, which we've been using all along. And they say whichever of those 2 metrics is worse determines your what cell you're in or what range you're in. And when we started this presentation last week, we were in the high transmission red category because we were at, I want to say 116 cases per 100,000, and you need under 100 in order to be in orange. Well, we've since gone under 100. You'll see that on the next slide where we're at, but this is really interesting because for elementary schools, they recommend in red and orange that you should be in a hybrid and limit the school day duration so that you can cut your population in half and keep your distance. I want to say that in blue, yellow, orange, or red, they recommend all of the mitigation strategies. So we have to do all of those things regardless of where we're at. But they say that if we're in the orange or red, that our elementary schools should be in a hybrid at a big distance, and that the older kids, high school and middle school kids, should be full remote. And then in yellow, they say that those middle school and high school kids could handle a hybrid probably. And then when they get to blue, that's when they say everybody should be full in person. Well, we're in orange right now, but you'll see by the next slide. Why don't we go ahead to the next slide, Vern, so you can look at that while I'm talking. So this trend shows a drop off, like a nice steady downfall, really since December. And that's the downfall that moved us from red to orange in just the last 4 or 5 days. And if things keep going statistically the way they're going, that we would be likely in yellow by our spring break, which ends, we come back on April 5th. So middle school, the CDC recommends full remote in red and orange, hybrid in yellow, and full in person in blue. But they say that these are only recommendations, and they encourage you to do more if your numbers are good, and ours certainly are. So while they're saying go in person, go in person, go in person, and while they're saying, but only if you're yellow or blue, only if you're yellow and blue, they also say several times throughout the document that you need to make good decisions locally based on the success of your mitigation strategies. And as I've shown you tonight, our mitigation strategies are very successful so far. So Vern, let's go to transmission rates. These are our most recent numbers. Cook County is in 85 cases per 100,000, which is deep into the orange. We used to be above 100, which was red. It needs to be under 50 per 100,000 in order to get into the yellow. As a school district, our cases range from 70 to 106 per 100,000. So, interesting. And we're only showing you the cases per 100,000 because the positivity rate is the other metric, and it's much, much lower. So as soon as the transmission rates metric come down, as long as the positivity rate doesn't go up, we'll keep improving from red to orange where we're at now to yellow and eventually to blue. So these stats that are on this transmission rates slide put us in the orange range from the previous slide. And like I said, just last week we were in the red. So this is a hopeful trend. Vern, I'm ready for slide 11. So let's talk a little bit about what's going on right now. And slide 12, Vern. Right now we've got this mix of students. We've got 1,400 kids in hybrid, and we've got almost 900 kids in remote. And it shows you the breakdown there by grade level. All right, Vern. So next I take you through each of the schools individually, which may not interest you that much, except to know that we've got wildly varying choices among parents of different grade levels at different buildings. If you look at FERC, for example, Vern, are you still on the FERC slide? So in pre-K, 41% of the kids are remote, but in second grade, only 16% of them are. Go to the next slide, Vern. Fulton is a little bit more consistent. Next slide, Cruz. Cruz is a little bit more consistent. I draw your attention to this because changing programs, those are the wild cards. And obviously we would need a new survey of parents to get to know, how many of them in the hybrid program would come in full, how many in the hybrid program would go full remote. And if there's anybody that's in the full remote program that would come in full, there's probably a good number of those as well. For some families, they'd rather be in person, but half days in person are just harder to schedule childcare for their family. So they go full remote and get childcare all day. Vern, why don't you click on Memorial? Memorial is another one of those. If you look at their fifth grade, over half of their students are remote. So that's interesting. When it's 50-50 and you've got 2 teachers, that's pretty easy to schedule. If you've got 3 teachers, that's much more difficult to schedule. You can't have 1.5 of them teach in person and 1.5 of them teach remote. And I'm oversimplifying, but you can understand when you combine that with staff availability, it really is a puzzle. And that's why if we choose to make a change, we're going to need to give principals adequate time. And we likely won't be able to offer the exact same thing in every grade level in every building. But as always, we would improvise to try and do the best that we can if we were going to make a change. And let's show them CMS, Vern. CMS is getting to the point where 6th grade is a challenge for them because such a higher percentage of people have chosen to be in person in 6th grade that each of those classes is at that 20 mark, where if we start going any higher than that, we really start compromising space. And if you're going to do that, then then kind of what's the point? Maybe we ought to be doing something different there. But right now, 7th and 8th grade, it's a healthy split. You'll notice that more students are choosing remote at the middle school. Part of that might be that remote instruction seems to work better for older kids than it does for little bitties, because they're able to work more independently and have a handle on technology. But that's speculation. Obviously, that'll come out in the wash in our next survey. So slide 18, I want to start talking about what the board motivated us to do a few weeks ago at Committee of the Whole and what we've been doing. Before you dig too far deep into this, let me give you a little bit of context. So the objective then is to serve the kids that are the most in need as much as we can in person during the remote half of their day. And we have to work a la carte with families to arrange transportation and that sort of thing. But the idea is students who need more support in person than they can get during the in-person part of their day, we've been adding more and more of them for in-person services of one kind or another, and sometimes multiple kinds during the remote half of their day. So if you look at this enrichment intervention chart, the first box just to the right of the school's names, that's the total number of students today being served in that way. District-wide, there are 82 kids that are receiving some type of in-person service during the remote half of their day, in person. And there's 224 that are getting additional services remotely. That's enrichment, intervention, or other special services. And the reason why that number 82 is smaller than the totals of in-person from each of the other 4 categories is because some of those 82 students are receiving more than one of those types of additional services. English language learner services, special ed, social emotional needs, or tiered services from our MTSS program. So we've increased those numbers since committee of the whole. The board's call to action at the time was to infuse as much normalcy as we can in as many students' days as we can. And the mantra has always been students who are the most in need first. So that's what we've been doing. And principals are currently exploring ways to increase this. We've got a good amount of space in the building. In the element, let's talk just about elementary for a while. We've got a good amount of space available in the remote half of a classroom's day at the elementary schools. Most of those classrooms have a teacher in them teaching remotely for the students' remote half of the day. But there's room in the classroom to spread kids out. The problem is then the teacher that's teaching virtually in charge of supervising the students that are in there for some other reason. We've been racking our brains on how to utilize that space. Is there somewhere else the teachers could go and be distanced to do that work so that we can have their classroom and serve more kids in person during that time? So we're still fleshing that out, but schools are excited to hear that they're welcome to introduce more and more kids that can be served in person during the remote half of their day. And I would expect the numbers on that 18th slide for who's being served in person during the remote half of their day to increase between now and April 5th, and then again increase more before the end of the school year. So the next slide is consideration of instructional models. Let's talk a little bit about really the two things that we're talking about. Everybody knows that we're going to offer a full remote program no matter what we do. And for the rest of this year for sure, and no telling what the fall will bring, but right now we're required by law to offer a full remote option. So we're going to be talking about the students that are in person. This is slide 20, Vern. Considerations for remaining hybrid. And it says full remote, but that's the current program that we're in. Your choices are hybrid or full remote. Students remain with their current teachers. They remain with their current classmates. The rosters don't change. Their teacher doesn't change. Their schedule doesn't change. The order in which they receive their instruction doesn't change. Full remote students maintain their current program, which is going to be very important to our full remote students. The focus is on improving student learning rather than a focus on changing models. We talked about what an undertaking it is to change models. We're not afraid of that work. We're prepared to do it, but a good amount of what we do day to day to support teachers and to support students and to communicate well with families and all the other things that go with running a school building, those would have to be minimized at least a bit in order to create the time necessary administratively to change models. Now, to what model we change to, there's varying amounts of work, so we'll talk about that too. But smaller numbers of students at school allow for less contact during transitions, and it avoids unnecessary transitions, such as lunch. We're able to maintain physical distancing guidelines. I'm becoming less and less concerned about the guidelines with fidelity as I am with the results. And in this case, I'm highlighting the change in result for a number of students quarantined. I don't really feel like I can make an argument that a lot more kids will get sick if we put more kids in classrooms. So I'm not really interested in trying to make that argument. But I do have to be real in saying that if we do put more kids in classrooms, the number of kids that are going to quarantine is going to increase. And we're able to reinforce better personal hygiene practices due to smaller class sizes. If you've ever seen one of our teachers take a group of 5 or 6 year olds to the bathroom and teach them how to adequately wash their hands and get them each to do so, that's just a lot more challenging with 22 than it is with 9 or 10. Teachers and students are settled into this type of current programming. Discussions on how to improve student learning have resumed. Principals have reported that teachers are starting to hit their stride. Students may actually learn more if we continue to the same model rather than shifting to an entirely new model, as students will take time to adjust to new routines. Of course, either option has strengths and weaknesses that we'll explore in later slides. Vern, slide 21. Consideration of remaining hybrid and full remote, the cons. This is the downside of staying the course. We obviously have less time for in-person instruction than we want. We've got less time to address social emotional needs of students in person. Of course, if you increase the number of students in school, that doesn't necessarily mean more in-person social emotional efforts because we've got the same number of staff. So that's kind of, I wasn't sure which slide to put that on, but obviously less interaction with peers in a typical school environment. Yeah, I don't want to minimize the cons of staying the course because COVID fatigue is real. People are tired of it, and especially families that have already been through it or are vaccinated. It's certainly frustrating that they need to still do a good amount of their learning from home. So having a less than typical school environment is a major con to staying the course. Slide 22. There's some pros to returning full in person. They're going to be obvious to you. Students at school all day, increased in-person instruction, increased time to address social emotional needs. So that's basically the inverse of all the cons of staying in a hybrid. And then on slide 23, these are the challenges of considering a full in-person model. Almost everybody's going to have to change teachers and change classmates. When you consider how many of our teachers are teaching remotely right now, we need them all to teach in person if we change to full in person, or almost them all. And it's really about resources. So the teachers that we have committed to our full remote program, we're going to need to deploy them in the full in-person model, which will result in a lot of schedule changes. At least most. I'm tempted to say in some grade levels, almost all, which is a dramatic change in our full remote program as well, because we'd have to do something else. Time needed for student adjustment to in-person full-time. The routine will be different. School-related behavior, mask compliance over a longer duration. It's become really easy to keep kids masked for 2.5 hours. So we'd have to just go through getting them to stay masked all day, but we're not afraid of that, I'm just pointing it out. Time needed to address individualized learning, as students will potentially be assigned new teachers in classrooms. Physical distancing is going to result in a higher number of close contacts, which means higher number of students that have to go home for quarantine. And then if we choose to serve lunch on site, that'll require students to eat at atypical times. I'm not sure. It's interesting what 140 said about feeding kids kind of all over the building. It'll just be a choice which is more livable, having kids all over the place eating lunch, or having tons of lunch hours that result in kids eating at times that don't feel like lunchtime to them. And then we had this last bullet, the teachers may not be fully vaccinated. I'm less worried about that now because I really feel like that by April 5th, I really think that everybody who wants to be vaccinated will have their second dose and a couple weeks behind them before the 5th of April. I will also say that our private sources with the Pfizer, so there's only 3 weeks between doses, which is helpful too. The Moderna has a 4-week wait between doses. Slide 24. This goes along with what the board asked of us at committee of the whole about expanding some opportunities, infusing some normalcy for the remainder of the year. And some of these are going to be really exciting, and some of these are going to not really move you too much. But I just wanted to give you the full list there on slide 25, Vern, of things that principals feel like we can start doing now that we're in a later phase of recovery. And I'm excited about increased in-person learning interventions, that second bullet. And then, of course, I like all the other things. But then I'm particularly excited about the last 3 bullets, having a 5th grade party for 5th graders that are going to be leaving the elementary school, having a step-up day so they get a taste of Central before they go there, and 8th grade end-of-the-year activities. Principals also talked about having restoring field days for all students at the end of the year. Most of those activities happen outside, and we can keep kids apart and let them play. And this is, we left off some of the things that we've already started doing. Skills development for athletics at the middle school, band, beginning band for the elementaries. Some things that we've really, really missed. So we could stay in our current hybrid program and then really work on this extended student opportunities and really try and increase the number of students that are being served at school during the remote half of their day and get those numbers up. Or slide 26, Vern, what if, and then slide 27. So different ways that we could expand the day. And the first 2 bullets are basically along the lines of 140 strategy. And then the bottom 2 bullets are really along the lines of 135's strategy. Lunch is a pain, challenging, potentially dangerous, unless we do it right, which we would. But if we change the way specials are delivered at the middle school, for example, extending the in-person part of the day would be relatively easy. But their specials would take a hit because we can't have kids changing classes and moving all around the building. If we reschedule everyone, that pretty much consumes principals for the next 3 or 4 weeks. There's a reason why we do that work in the summer. The normal principal stuff needs to be pushed aside in order to get that done now. If we simulcast the remoters, there's a lot less rescheduling to do, which is good, but the quality of instruction isn't as good. Difference in receiving full remote instruction from a teacher versus simulcast instruction. It's just a very different experience for your remote learners. It's tough. This is the tough part. Like when you move more resources to one part of the program, you're moving them away from another part of the program. So if you go to one of these expanded day options, you're going to be serving the in-person students better, and you're going to be serving the remote students not quite as well. And of course, the challenge to administration is going to be to do it as well as it can be done and minimize the challenges. So slide 28. If you do full in person, the principals are going to advocate for the first bullet. They're going to want to preserve the good remote learning. They're going to want some of their teachers dedicated to the full remote program so they can continue to teach two-way with the full remote students. The downside of that is almost everybody's going to have a new teacher and new classmates, even the full remoters. The second bullet is easier. You can turn it on a dime. You can move kids from quarantine. They don't have to change teachers when they go home for their quarantine. They just become a fly on the wall of the same classroom they're used to being in. So they can bounce back and forth between remote and in person seamlessly without really causing much disruption at all. But the downside is the remote instruction isn't as rich. So that brought us to our recommendation slide, Vern, that's 29. So the recommendation from administration hasn't changed, except that it includes all the enhancements that we talked about, and getting serious about serving kids during the remote half of their day in person for some of those services, and then also infusing as much normalcy as possible into everybody's day. And those opportunities would be available even to our full remote kids. They could come in for a field day. They could come in for a skills camp. They could come in for any of those things that they want to participate in. So our recommendation hasn't changed, but it's not, we're not drawing a line in the sand. I'm certainly not pounding my fist to get it, because I recognize what's not better about what we're doing right now. And I recognize what would be better about a change to full in person. I just have to do my job and do an effective job communicating about what's weak about the other plan and who's not going to like that, so that we can make as good of a decision as we can. If you wanted to consider those full in-person models, what I'd like to do this week is survey the community and try and get to the bottom of how many of them would choose what, by grade level, by school. Discuss those results with you at the committee of the whole, which is less than a week away, and re-strategize. And then, I don't know, other than getting the survey results and maybe one meeting with administration between now and the committee of the whole, I don't know how far down the road we would be to developing all four of those full in-person options. But I can tell you that I'll have a better handle on how many of the community want each. So that could result in a good conversation with the board next Monday. And then we would just go to work developing which of those options are attractive to the board, and we wouldn't have to develop the ones that aren't. And we'll have a better idea, and you'll have a better idea which those are when we get the survey results back. I asked Laura, I don't know if this got done or not, but to attach a draft version of the survey to board docs so you take a look. We went back and forth about how much we should explain each of those choices to the community so they can make good decisions about which to choose. And it's a bit darned if you do, darned if you don't with different folks. So if you explain it fully, it sounds like you're stacking the deck for or against one of the choices. If you don't tell them anything, they're going to choose this, but then not realize what's wrong with that choice until after they've made their choice. The other risk that we run by sending that survey is some of that survey dissatisfaction we had at the very beginning of the year, where we were posing hypotheticals to parents so that we could develop which options we wanted to offer. And then when their favorite option wasn't one of the options offered, they wondered why we asked them in the first place. So those are all natural reactions to a survey. That's why we don't want to over-survey. But, if we're going to be 50-50 in one grade level and 90-10 in another, that's information that's really important to us with that staffing puzzle before taking the next step. Well, that concludes the presentation part of the night. And I'm eager to hear some reaction from the board and ultimately the community.
Thanks, Jeff. Personally, I think, yes, we need to do a survey as fast as possible and get the community's reaction and see if we can get full in person by the last trimester of the year. I think the thing that concerns me the most, Jeff, is not only the loss of learning that's happening, but the mental health issues that kids are facing. So I think that just getting them back in school for the last 2 months of the year would be probably the best thing to do. I'd like to hear from the other board members. Darcy, would you like to comment?
Sure, absolutely. I agree with John. I think that the more resources we can put towards a survey quickly and find out exactly where our community's at. I also have pretty grave concerns that one of the cons for a full day is that, you know, this continued emphasis on how remote learning would be negatively impacted, and I don't think it has to be. I think that there are resources we could provide, and there's work that can be done to make sure that those full remotes, those families that choose to remain full remote,
Right.
have as many resources as we can give them. Obviously, it's different than being full in person, but that's those families' choices.
Right.
And our job as a school district is to serve our families and to provide education to students. So whatever we would have to do to make sure that if we went full remote, if we went back full in person, which is the way that I would like to see us go, that we also provide as robust as possible a remote program as well.
Right. Thank you.
Darcy, is it okay if I answer to Darcy's comments a little bit?
Yes.
So,
Go ahead.
Darcy, I think that based on your comments, Vern, if you can go back to slide 27, I think you're probably going to like that first bullet the best, and that's the one that the principals like the best. The downside of that one is that everybody needs to be rescheduled, but the upside is if we do that well, everybody who's in person has a dedicated in-person teacher, and everybody that's remote has a dedicated remote teacher. So the downside of that is everybody getting in, it all being remixed up. But that's the price you pay in order to get quality in both programs. So that's the give and take there. So if you're go ahead.
Sorry, I just wanted to, I'm sorry to interrupt, but the slide 27, I have a question on about the 5 hour, the fourth bullet point, the 5 hour day, no lunch, simulcast remote learners.
Yes.
Are you saying in that one that not everyone will need to be rescheduled?
That's right. So there'd be some rescheduling necessary, but depending on, a number of factors that we can get into later, but almost everybody in either simulcast model, most people will be able to keep their teacher. But that's at odds with what Darcy said about the quality of the remote instruction. So it's just, do you want the disruption or do you want the quality?
Jeff, I have to say, I'm taking a bit of exception to this assumption that the simulcast model is going to be so necessarily inferior. I mean, off the top of my head, I can think of a few pros. One, we're social distancing our kids that are in person. I would think that there would be tremendous opportunity for small group work to be performed between the in-person children and the full remote children. I think from a social emotional standpoint, our full remote children being a part of something that resembles something more like an actual classroom could be a potential opportunity. I would think the fact that our in-person students will be going to actual specials classes, art, music, what have you, the chance of our full remote children to participate alongside in those courses could be a potential benefit to them compared to what we're offering right now. And also, I mean, when we talk about, these kids as a fly on the wall, our teachers, they don't stand and lecture to our children for 5-6 hours a day. That's not our model. Our motto is that our teachers are working with our students, and our students are working independently. They're working in small groups. I would imagine there would be opportunities during the course of every day for the teacher to potentially address the in-student kids or in-person children for a period of time while the remote students that are under their care might be working independently. And then there would be an opportunity to switch. So I think I don't necessarily agree with your characterization that this simulcast model would be all downside and no upside for our remote students. There might be trade-offs, but I think there's potential for a lot of opportunity there as well. I mean, and I mean, as far as, I don't know, all this to me, everyone's working hard and doing their best, but what I know that we do best, what I've been an advocate for the first 4 years on the board before this whole crazy year, was we do our in-person education model better than just about any other district I've come across. My kids have had a great experience with it, and we need to get back to that as much as we can. And I think we can incorporate some of those things to our remote children while we do it. I mean,
Yeah, Rick, I think,
so all I want to say is I don't think we can dismiss this simulcast model as just being, throwing the remote kids to the side of the road. I just don't accept that out of hand.
yeah, Rick, you're making a fair point. You guys will remember at the beginning of the night, I talked about how my 6 children in my house have actually had a really decent simulcast remote learning experience during their quarantine. So it suits some learners better than others. I'm moved by what you said about them being able to experience more different things kind of with a community of in-person learners. I think that that's an interesting perspective. I don't think it'll be garbage. I just think that more kids, parents will perceive it to be less intimate than having a dedicated remote teacher is all.
When we talk about trade-offs, would you say that an offset would be more instruction time to the remote learners? Would be an advantage?
In the simulcast model, Julie?
Right,
Yeah, I mean, they would be getting
because
5
right now it would
or,
be two
I
and
mean,
a
if you
half, two,
chose-
yeah.
Yeah, if you chose one of the first 2 bullets, they'd be getting a full day of simulcast instruction. And if you chose one of the bottom 2, they'd be getting 5 hours of simulcast instruction. I'm sorry. If you chose the second bullet, they'd be getting a full day of remote. And if you chose the 4th bullet, they'd be getting 5 hours of full remote. Plus, they're in a 5-hour day, they would all be getting some asynchronous remote in addition to their 5-hour day.
Well, and I think a lot of what we've heard tonight, as Rick said, there's a lot of assumptions baked into a lot. And I would really, again, emphasize the need for a robust parent survey to reach as many parents as we can to find out where our heads are. We know the parents that we've heard from, and obviously we're going to hear from quite a few tonight, which is great. But we also need to hear from as many stakeholders in our community, as many parents as possible, as quickly as possible, to decide where the community is at and where our school community needs to be.
Jeff, can I say something?
Go ahead, Vince.
Okay. I agree with Rick on the simulcast model because we use that at the high school and it works great. Okay, so we have, today I was happy. I had 18 kids out of a possible 40 show up, which is great. Sorry. We do the simulcast model where I'm working with some of the kids, I'm working on the computer sometimes, then I have the full class in front of me. But most of the time, like the first 25 minutes is helping kids on the computer, but I'm still teaching the class that's in front of me because we're doing the same assignment. So it works great. So Rick, I agree with you. That is not a bad model to do because we're getting more kids back in the school that way, or at the high school we are. So
Yeah, Vince, the nice thing about that too is everybody's on the same content in the classroom, whether they're remote or in person.
see, our only issue we have is they gave them a choice. You can show up or you cannot show up. I wish they would have said you have to be in school or you have to be remote. Because it's hard to keep track of kids, because they could be all over the place. Sometimes they show up, sometimes they don't. So I try to offer them incentives like, if you come in for the 4 days a week, I will grade you on your performance during that day and not the playing test that I'm going to give you through Smart Music on Friday. But yeah, the simulcast model works great. I mean, the full day simulcast model would work great. I mean, with the everybody in.
I think, Vince, I think you'll find that that probably works a bit better for the older students than the little bitties.
Well, I think it would work with the little kids too, because I think, you know, the little kid is sitting in front of that screen, and I am not really a big advocate, speaking as an educator, for a kid sitting in front of now. Dean and I had this discussion. I think Dean and I had this discussion while he was walking his dog by my house, and we thought, you know, this is not working. So I think we have to try something. You know, it's like when we had first brought this whole hybrid model up, you know, and then people were saying to me, well, why did you vote no on the hybrid model? Or why did you vote no not to have kids in school? I didn't vote no not to have kids in school. I voted no not to have.
Vince, that was before. We're trying to figure out what we're going to do now.
This is a great way with the simulcast to, you know, get those kids back in class. It's closer to what the model we had when we introduced Monday, was it Monday, Wednesday, Friday?
So which
Similar.
version would you prefer
Of what?
of the 4 bullet points?
Those? I like, well, the question is lunch too, you know? You have to figure out how we're gonna do that. If we can do the lunch, I think the full day simulcast with all those people in there would be great.
Okay.
That's my position as a parent, a teacher, especially a teacher, because I'm living through that right now. So that's just my opinion on it.
Okay, Julie,
Vince,
I'm sorry,
Vince,
go ahead, Jeff.
I'm sorry. I'd just like to agree with Vince that if the administration can figure out a way to do lunch, I like the first 2 bullets a lot better than the second 2, just because it gives us more of what we're trying to get by expanding the day. And then it'll just, you know, if we can figure out a way to do lunch safely and at characteristic times, then it's just a matter of, do you want to reschedule everybody and have remote teachers and in-person teachers, or do you want to simulcast everybody? And there's strengths to either, and there's weaknesses to either as well.
And the other thing, Rick, you said about breakout sessions and stuff for kids, that works really well with the simulcast, because while you're working with the kids in the classroom, those other kids have little projects that they're working on, so you're keeping them busy through the whole hour. Just the thought.
Okay, Julie, Barry?
Yeah, I'm support surveying the community and giving them as much information as possible,
Okay.
as quickly as possible. I'm also for more in-person instruction time, as well as quality remote learning, which is why I asked my question about the trade-off to give more instruction time. Would that be
Julie Jackson?
advantage?
Well, can you hear me, Jeff?
Yes, I can hear you. Thanks,
Okay.
Julie.
I'm really not sure. I have a lot of concerns for our younger students dealing with a simulcast sort of situation. Some of them are remote learners because they have to be remote. And having witnessed, and I'm living remote kindergarten right now, I can't imagine watching a teacher try to engage kids in front of her and kids on a screen. Those kids, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. And we've got our kids with our IEPs. We have our kids that are at risk. And I think that a lot of consideration has to go into how they're going to be handled and if we were to do something like this, because I think it would be very difficult for these little kids to adjust to this. So I can't say, I really can't say how, because I have to remember those kids. Those kids are being hit the hardest. I mean, we're talking about the mental health of our kids, and a lot of you people are talking about the mental health of the average kids.
Please, excuse me, please let her speak. Please let her finish. Go ahead.
Not every child that has an IEP or is at risk can be in school right now.
Julie, I really think it sure sounds like we're moving in that direction. And, you know, the administration, when they said that their when we say that our recommendation is to stay in the hybrid, it's not because we think it's a lot better than these other options. Like, I tried tonight to point out what's strong and weak about each one of them. But if the board's will is to come back full in person, the administration is ready to do that. And, you know, I'd like to hear from them. You know, maybe it's simulcast at the middle school or intermediate and middle school, and maybe it's reassignment at the primary, or, you know, maybe it's, you know, depending on grade level and how people respond to the survey in different grade levels in different schools. And it's going to be a factor, you know, what we can staff and what we can't staff too. So, you know, if this is going the way it sounds like it's going, then I just need time with the administration to flesh it out and come back with a good recommendation for how to do it.
Okay, Dean, would you like to?
Yes, I would. We have a great relationship with quite a few districts, and I know some of them are doing all 4 of these. Maybe get some input from neighboring districts who are simulcasting, and they could share their experience and maybe put some of these fears to rest. I think, John, you hit it right on the head. I think 2 months, 8 weeks in front of back in school would do a world of good. And there is a value in trying. There is a value in the effort to do what is the right thing to do. We need to get back. This has always been a process. Last July, when we started down this road, we were told we were going to evaluate this everywhere down the road, and we're going to adapt. And
Right.
with the goal of getting everybody back in school. This is why the teachers were moved to the head of the line for the vaccine. It was to get everybody back to school right away, as safe as possible. That goes without saying. Of course, it's as safe as possible.
Right.
I have a quick question, though, on how the data is calculated. When you said per 100,000 for our district, we have 2,300 students, correct, roughly, round numbers?
Yep.
Okay, so every positive case is magnified by a factor of 42?
Yeah.
Okay, so it won't take many cases to push you into the red, correct?
No, Dean,
Okay,
that's why
so-
we put the.
all right.
That's what.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
I'm
That's
sorry,
why
go
we
ahead,
put-
Jeff.
That's why we put the range in there for our local one, because it's just not reliable with this small of a sample of students. But the relevant sample or the relevant number from the CDC's point of view is what's going on in your county. So that top line that's got Cook County's numbers is the relevant one, and that's the one that was at 116 and now is at 85 or so. So it's moving in the right direction.
Yeah, I'm not going to get in a debate, but even Cook County, of 5 million people spread across how many thousands of square miles, is not necessarily accurate. And if there's a hot spot in Highland Park or Bartlett or something, Tinley Park and Orland Park and Oak Forest aren't necessarily affected, and vice versa.
Well,
I mean,
Dean,
it cuts both ways using a county number that large. I think we're too small to be compared to a per 100,000 case, and Cook County's too large. Is there something in the middle that's going to be a little bit more relevant?
Dean, I don't know, but I know that we're kind of flying in the face of the guidelines already. Like at the elementary level, they're saying that in orange, you can start considering a hybrid, and at yellow is when you should start considering a hybrid for the middle school. So we're already more open than the guidelines suggest, but we've also got really great metrics, which is what's given me the confidence to consider opening up some more. So, I feel like I said all those things. Anything that I'm saying is not as good as something else. I'm not saying it doesn't have merit at all. I'm just trying to paint a picture of what's strong and what's weak about each option so the board can make a good decision.
Okay, and one more quick question. This survey, I mean, tonight, it's Tuesday night. We're meeting again on Monday in 6 nights from now. I'm assuming the survey is going to be available tomorrow morning.
Yeah, I mean, if the board, the reason why I put it in board docs was so the board can take a look at it. And if it's in the spirit of what the board wants in the survey, we're prepared to send it as soon as you say so. If you'd like some changes, I'm happy to entertain those. And then, but my expectation is that we would get that survey out tomorrow.
Okay, thank you. John?
Rick, would you like to comment?
Yeah, I am in favor of, I could be persuaded to either of the full-day models. I got to be honest with you, lunch, I think lunch is important. I realize lunch might be a pain for us to figure out, but you know what? To me, school is about more than just learning math and reading. It's about these kids forging relationships, making friendships, learning how to socialize. And I think a big thing that's missing is lunch. I mean, put yourself in the shoes of a family that maybe moved here for the first time this year. They have children that are new to the district. What opportunities have they had to make friends, to forge relationships? I mean, lunch is important to these kids. This is where there's learning going on in lunch too, social, emotional. And so I feel strongly that one of the full day options is going to be the way to go. My suspicion is that I think the simulcast can be done in a very strong way, but you know, I would be open to, hopefully we're going to survey the community, and if a large majority of those that choose to remain remote learning want to stay in a rescheduled environment or so, then I would be open to that. But I think full day, including lunch, is what's, you know, that's my priority.
Thanks, Rick.
Hey, would anybody else on the board like to make a comment?
I just wanted clarification from Jeff. From the CDC guidelines, is that red, yellow, blue, is that new? Is that something they added in? Because I don't remember seeing that.
Yeah, Vince, that's new with the new round of CDC guidance. It's when
Okay.
they've started using 2 metrics instead of 1. And Vern, if you'll pull slide 8 up, you'll
Just trying to
see.
read through that's confusing enough, so I just,
Yeah, so Vince, let me help you. So the 2 rows that go left or right underneath the color boxes,
okay.
the first row just below the colored boxes is cases per 100,000 in the community.
Puts us in orange.
And then the bottom row is percentage of positivity rate for people who have been tested in your area. And whichever one of those 2 is worse, you go by whichever color it puts you in.
Okay.
And right now, our cases per 100,000 is worse than our positivity rate. And that puts us in the orange. But my guess is by April 5th, which is when we'd be advocating for a change, that the district will be in the yellow, and it'll be a good thing for us to do.
And are those
If I-
numbers? Oh, go. Sorry.
I'm sorry, I was just going to finish saying that I wouldn't have had a slide with those full in-person options if I thought that they were going to be unsafe.
These numbers that we're looking at with the red, orange, yellow, blue, are those based on our school population, or are they based on Cook County?
They're based on Cook County. We tried to
Okay.
do a metric within the school district, but the cases per 100,000, it's tough when you're only dealing with
Sure.
3,000 folks. So, you know, we can do town metrics. They're all about the same. And they're all orange. They're bigger than 50 and less than 100 right now.
Okay, thank you.
But wouldn't we want to do a town metric for us? Because like Dean said, you could have a hot spot up in Arlington Heights somewhere. They have what we're doing here.
Well, Vince, what I'd like to do, the CDC guidance that this came from also talks a lot about your local success. That means within the walls of your school district. Like if we can open full in person and our numbers stay good, then it doesn't matter much which zone we're in. What's going on outside the school walls won't impact us if our mitigation strategies are working. So, you know, I was telling you what the CDC recommends for each level, but if we were going on that, like I said, we'd be in full remote at the middle level, and we'd be talking about a hybrid now at the elementary, and we're way ahead of that, and we're being successful. So if I was afraid of opening up more, we wouldn't have had the slides that laid them out as options.
All right, thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Is that good, Jeff? From us?
Yes, I feel good. I
Okay.
just want board feedback privately about the survey before we send it out.
Looks good to me. Has anybody else looked at it? Okay, all right.
Good tonight.
It's in board doc.
Everybody will let you know as soon as possible.
And it's actually, it's been an edit or two since I've seen it, so I want to take another look at it before I like it.
Okay. All right. So right now, I'm going to open it up for public comment. If somebody would like to come up to the mic and have a comment, come on up. The iPad that's in front of the podium is a camera, so Dr. Stawick can see you. And the mic is so he can hear you. If you want to sign the sheet and state your name. Please be respectful and brief. Normally we keep public comment at 5 minutes. If there isn't many people, I let people go longer, but tonight we're going to keep it at 3 minutes. So,
Okay. Dr. Stewick, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Hi, Dr. Stewick. So we have had many emails. I'm Holly Schweider, and most of you board have heard from me as well. I want to talk to Julie, is that correct, whom brought up the idea of the small children and the concerns. And those concerns are valid. But I do need to say that I spent my day doing that today and yesterday. I am a preschool through 8th grade music teacher in the Catholic schools. And I am teaching simultaneously, or as you say, how did you phrase it?
Simulcasting.
I call it synchronous.
Yep.
And I do that every day. And when I walk into a room, whatever the grade level, I immediately I see a screen and I see students in front of me. I could look at the screen and say, oh, Johnny is missing. And immediately the kids that are in person will go, oh, he ran to the bathroom. Oh, his mom made him run outside and let the dog, but he's going to come back. They are working as an extension of my classroom. It is not a separate thing. They're not a fly on the wall. These kids on the screen with me are just a part of my classroom as the kids that are in front of me. And I treat them as such. And yes, of course, it is a little bit harder with the younger grades, and especially if we do have kids with special needs. I teach part-time, but I also been subbing a lot at my district this year, in my school this year, because of course, finding subs has been a little crazy. And so yesterday I subbed 1st grade. And we do have a special needs kid in there, and he was remote because he had to be quarantined. And there were some issues with him, with his mother, and trying to keep him engaged. But I challenged that those issues would have been encountered whether he was remote with a remote instructor or remote simultaneous. And what I mean is there is no teacher in our district, I believe, that would see a child on their screen and ignore them or treat them as a fly on the wall. There is no teacher in our district that isn't so passionate about each and every one of these kids that wouldn't immediately see that need and just like within the classroom, get the kids in the classroom engaged on an activity and say, I need to deal with this, which is exactly what I did. And I was able to talk to him, Mom was able to walk away, and we went on with our activities for the rest of the day. It is a valid point, but I don't think that that's going to change whether or not we have synchronous learning, full in-person. The remote learning simply is not of the same quality as in-person, we know that, but that doesn't mean that our remote students can't get as best of a quality and continue to get the highest quality education that we as teachers can provide for them. I've been doing it all year. Is it easy? Absolutely not. But nothing we have done this year has been easy. But I keep challenging the board that we must continue to find a way to do what is right. And we must find a way to support the families in what they desire and what they want for their students. And I think that survey is going to show that not only are the majority of the parents wanting full in-person, I challenge you to maybe even consider the teachers where we're at. I think the majority of our teachers are saying this hybrid model is not effective. We're tying the hands of these teachers and restricting them from what they're being able to do. We're not giving them the opportunity to teach in the way that they are best trained and equipped for. We put their hands behind their back and say, no, but now do the very best job for every student that you have. Even if they're interacting with only online and only remote students, their hands are still tied as to whether or not their parents make sure that child's in the screen. to make sure that child was fed by the parent. These are the same problems that we've been dealing with for years and generations as teachers, is it does fall a lot on the parents, but that doesn't negate the fact of what we're able to do as teachers. I have an incredible amount of faith in the teachers in this district. My children, I have a high schooler now who has had nothing but successful stories from these teachers, and I think our teachers are capable and willing and able to take on this new challenge, and I think our kids deserve it.
Thank you. Is there any more comments?
Hi, my name is Ann Frederick. I live in Gulfview Estates. I have a question. You said that 60,
Could you please sign in?
sure, said that 60 teachers are currently out for accommodation. Can you explain that to me?
Did you hear that, Jeff?
Yeah, do you want me to answer questions from the crowd?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm asking John.
She just wants clarification on the 60 teachers
Just
that are.
because my question is this: if FCCRA is the reason, it's a 14-day period from what I understood, but this sounded a little more extended.
Well, we've got teachers with accommodations in a number of different categories. Some of them are for health reasons, and that's really has nothing to do with FCCRA, but there are some that qualified under FCCRA for child rearing leave or some other FCCRA type of leave, where if they had requested a leave, they would have qualified for it. But instead of them requesting that leave, we've asked if they would continue teaching if we provided them with accommodation. So it was most of those, or a good number of those at least, are teachers that are teaching remotely at our request so that they don't take a leave because of the teacher shortage. We can't replace teachers on leave the way you typically could in the past, because there's not very many certified teachers that are unhired right now.
Are you currently able to do the in-person teaching if those teachers don't return back to the school?
Well, I think they're going to come back. I mean, I got to get to the bottom with that. And the problem is it's not just a group where I can negotiate with a group of people. Like, it's between me and the employee and the doctor and, independent circumstances. So we have to go through them case by case, but we're going to be doing that whether we change models or not.
Understood. So it just seems a little interesting to me. I'm not sure. You had mentioned earlier that some of them have some childcare issues, that you could be gone for an extended period of time. So whether or not that's the case, I'm hoping that they do get back to school so our kids can also go back to school. Another thing I'm concerned about with your survey, and I think the survey is a good idea, there's a lot of us who have enrolled our kids in private school, and I'm sure the Archdiocese is loving it right now. We want to get our kids back to public school. I'm one of them. I have a kindergartner. I'd love to send her to Cruise next year. So I want some assurance that this board is going to work together and collectively to get our kids back into in-person school full days.
Yeah, if I can, John, you mind if I react to that?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I mean, I just want everybody, since I probably have a pretty good audience right now, every conversation I've had with every board member and every administrator has resulted in a resolve to be full in person in the fall, kind of, unless something new or different or wild happens. Like, whether or not to make a change this year is really as much about whether it's worth the disruption to do it. And I'm talking about the disruption to kids. I'm not talking about the work that it would take on behalf of administration and teachers. I'm talking about whether or not the disruption to kids would be worth it. It sounds like this room certainly thinks that it would be. But unless it's illegal for us to open, our intention is to have a full in-person program on the first day next school year. We may be required to offer a full remote program. We'll talk about what that would look like at a later date. But everyone I've talked to's intention is to be full in person on the first day of next school year, regardless of what we do this year.
I think that's great. We have 7 of 8 families that were all supposed to have kindergartners starting this year in District 146, and one of those families is the only one that brought their kid to 146 this year. It's a real shame. I think it's harmful for the community. I think together, collectively, we've got to look forward to make sure that we get everybody back in-person learning. and give the best education as possible to keep our property values intact as well.
Thank
Yep,
you.
I think we're all coming from the same place.
Thank you.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to comment?
I'm Karen Lyons. I am
Hi, Karen.
Hi. I am the ESP Union co-chair, vice president. The reason why I'm speaking is our ESP Union, we want the kids to come back. We love seeing the kids every morning coming in. We really do. Our biggest concern is safety. Right now, we as paras, we are stretched. We are sharing, we are considered shared paras. We have a few one-on-ones. And those kids, they do need to be in school full day. They need to be there. But the problem is that we will be even stretched further. So what the ESP, and I know we're going to be negotiating this year, we really want to make sure that it's going to be safety for all. That's our major concern, mental and physical for students and teachers and staff. We want to make sure that we have additional social and emotional help, not just for the students, teachers and staff too. And we really need that support, and we need commitment that we will get that and we will get additional help. We want the kids full day. However, right now, the school I'm at, we have a special room. We have 2 separate rooms for our special ed kids. And if we go full day, I don't see how we're going to spread out us paras in order to accommodate that. That's safety. We want to make sure those kids are taken care of. We want to give them the education and the treatment and the special concerns that they need. The hybrid model is working currently for the special ed kids. How will those special ed kids stay in school for a full day? How will they keep their mask on? Right now, there are some of them that have an issue or have mask exemptions. There are some paras that work in the early learning program that there's only 2 paras in a room, and there's a max of 10 kids in the pre-learning program. However, you've got at least half of those kids are special needs. What happens when we go full day? How much more will we increase those rooms? That's a concern. That is a major concern for our paras and our staff. Please take that in consideration. Once again, we want those kids back in school, but please make sure that there's safety.
Thank you, Karen. Okay, would anybody else like to comment?
Hi, my name is Crystal Pavlovsky. I have 2 children at Cruz Education Center. I have a 10-year-old and I have a 6-year-old, so I have a 1st grader and a 5th grader. It's a lot to unpack, everything that's been said here already today. Mr. Stawick, I think you know that you and I have had several communications about my feelings about the way that the school district has effectuated the hybrid model, given the options that we had at the beginning of this particular school year, which I thought were at least hopeful that we were going to have a couple of days for full in-person instruction, a week for our kids, and then that kind of, the wool got pulled under us in that regard. Let me digress for a second. This is my first time at a board meeting, so I just want to clarify. You guys are all board members, correct?
Yes.
Just the individuals on the
Yes.
outer tables?
There are 7 of us.
How many of you have children in the district
All of us have.
currently?
Yes. No, currently?
Currently.
3.
I'm the caregiver for my grandson.
I'm sorry?
I'm the caregiver for my grandson at Memorial.
Okay, but not an actual child of your own in the district
No,
right now?
but I'm taking care of him while his father's at work, so all of his schooling.
Well, I mean, that wasn't the question, but I appreciate the information. So I guess my question to you guys is, we talk a lot about stakeholders, we talk a lot about, the individuals that are making the decisions for our community of families here, and I'm really not sure why more input isn't being requested from the district parents, because I could offer to you that the amount of students and the amount of families that are choosing the hybrid model right now may be choosing that, I think, as Dr. Stawick suggested, because it's completely logistically impractical for a ton of families to drop kids off for 2.5 hours and then have to pick them up, as if we're still operating on a preschool model. So if they were surveyed now, which it sounds like that's the direction that we're going, and I appreciate that, it sounds like we would have a greater majority of families, certainly all the families, or most of the families that are here, the representatives of the families that are here today, would definitely opt for that full in-person, resuming in-school instruction. So of all of you board members, like, I'm just wondering where you guys are gathering your data and what basis you all have to have voted since the beginning of the year for our children to stay in the model that we're in, which I don't think is very effective. What's the basis? What's the basis for the voting? And what's the basis for any opposition to full in-person
Well,
learning?
we're not here to answer questions. This is just public comment right now. So in the process of a board meeting, we open up, we have a time set for people to come and make comment.
Sure.
to the
Dr.
board.
Stawick talked, though, for almost an hour. So when would there be an opportunity for parents, which I assume are your district stakeholders, to offer their opinion and offer their positions outside of a survey? And if we're taking a survey, is this public information, the data that's going to be gathered? Is that going to be a survey that the public at large or your community of parents?
Again, the data that's going to be collected is going to be looked at and brought up at one of our next meetings.
Okay.
So it will be public, yes. I don't know to what specifics, but again, we're here just to take public comment right now.
Okay.
So we're not, it's not an question answer situation.
Okay, well, then I guess another thing that I want to offer to you is that I think everybody is aware that, the transmissions and the amount of positive cases has significantly gone down, as we've said. So, and I think there's been a lot of narrative today about the difficulty of, moving to a full-time model and how that would impact our kids as far as like switching teachers or whatever. I feel like that's being presented in a way that's trying to deter parents or district stakeholders from wanting to get their kids back in school because of the possibility of kids having to change classrooms. I mean, the most important thing is to get our kids back in school so that they can have their social development, reconnections. Like board member Rick had suggested, like lunch is super important, like the social emotional development that it's considerably lacking for all of our kids. All of our kids are suffering. It's very difficult on district parents who work. And a lot of families that are in this arena have had to look elsewhere for their children, into private schools, into homeschooling. And we're losing a lot of district families as a result of the decisions that this board has thus far made. And I did agree that we need to work together, not only as board members, but with the opinions of the community stakeholders, meaning the parents in our community, and not just it be a collective, like 8 individuals who decide the fate of all of us parents and all of our district children. It feels much more like a dictatorship than a community outreach and, collective opinion and sort of, working together for the greater goal.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, I'm Katie Teresi.
Hi, I'm sorry, what was your name?
Katie Teresi.
Katie?
I have a, sorry, a little nervous. I have a first grader at Cruz right now. I'm strongly considering private. We have a tour scheduled for CJB just because of the lack of communication. from the school district at this point. I wrote a letter earlier today to the board just to get my thoughts down on paper, and I won't read that now. But a lot of that was addressed today, and I want to appreciate Rick and several of the board members who advocated for in-person learning, because I think you're right, and with all the points made about screencasting, I feel like there is a more effective way that we can get students back in school safely. I think all of my questions were actually addressed by the board, and again, I appreciate that. The one thing I wanted to maybe, if you're not already thinking about this, is add to the survey. Survey parents, I think that is something that I am just shocked that Dr. Jeff Starbuck, I think your presentation, to me, it very much indicated that you were leaning towards, let's not disrupt the current model. Like, it might be more of a pain in the butt to do that, and we're gonna throw kids off. And I don't know if that was your intention or not, but that's really how it came across, that you want to keep things as is. And in your letter on February 9th, you stated that the hybrid model will continue. I think the survey needs to go out as soon as possible. I think parents, again, 68% of parents are already choosing hybrid, and I feel like, you know, this is my assumption, but maybe surveying them, you'll get a majority of the family wanting to return back in person. So if that happens and the survey goes out as soon as possible, can we have are we going to have a time limit? Or will there be a strategic plan shared, so we're not wondering when all of these changes, because you sound like it's a big, you know, it's a big thing to tackle, making all these changes. Are we going to be privy to that information, that strategic plan?
I'm suggesting April 5th, if we're going to make a change, that we make it the day we come back from spring break, which would be April 5th.
Oh, so the change will be, so if we make a change, if the survey indicates a change,
Right.
then we will start April 5th.
That would be the start of the last trimester of the year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Dagny Dorr. This is my husband, Sean Dorr. So
Hi.
we thought we could come together.
Sure.
We live together, okay. My family is all in Louisiana, Texas, Florida, who have been full person since August. They wear masks and they hand sanitize. Some temperature check, some don't. They're all together, thousands of students, in person. The teachers ask for nothing. There's no fancy HEPA filters. There's no dividers. Lake Charles, Louisiana, where my family's from, survived 2 devastating hurricanes. Children still went to school. Teachers still came to school. They got blue tarps on the ceiling, okay, blue tarps on the roofs. They had no electricity, okay, in some places. All the time, the kids remained in school after they got the hurricane kind of debris, everything, makeshift classrooms, and children going to school full-time, preschool, kindergarten through high school. They are experiencing soccer tournaments, state volleyball high school playoffs, prom, homecoming. They are eating together, full cafeterias. They are eating together. So I understand all these spreadsheets of data, but it's just very hard for me to stomach when my own nieces and nephews and cousins are full time. And they're showing me pictures of their homecoming, their soccer games, their playoffs, their school sports, and they have no big infection rate. Their numbers are very similar to ours. So again, when it's all this data about how dangerous it is, they mask and they wash their hands, and their kids are in school and they're thriving, and they're not committing suicide, and they're happy and they're laughing. You look around, kids hate school now. They hate school. They hate it. So even the ones who are remote, they're been so taught to avoid each other. How are you feeling about yourself? Think back to when you were a kid. Were you in school like this? No, you were not. You were socializing. You were having fun. I've got footage from my sister who sent for me a Mardi Gras parade in the school. It's 6,000 kids at this school. 6,000. The teachers are throwing Mardi Gras beads. Woo! The kids are all lined up next to each other, catching the beads. The kids are laughing, having fun. Half the kids in the parade have their masks down like this. And their infection rate is no some big outbreak. So I'm listening, I'm stomaching what you're telling us, but when my own family and friends, Texas, Louisiana, Florida, why don't we reach out to some states who are successful, not neighboring districts who are still, why don't you reach out to states who are full person all the time since August and are succeeding and the children are thriving? In Indiana.
Well, and just to add on to that, how about the Catholic schools around here? We have 4 children. I have 3 now in private school, extra 20 grand, plus my $14,000 in property taxes, which I'm not getting a discount on, or getting help that if I have to provide in-home care for my kids to sit in front of a computer screen. Why don't we talk to the CJB right down the road? They've been in school since day one. If somebody comes up with it, they take the precautions. They do what is necessary, and it is maintained 0 to no cases in their school. Talk to somebody. This is your job as a board, right? Is to represent the school district and represent the people within the school district who have kids who are involved in your schools. This is not a dictatorship, okay? These charts, you said yourself, doctor, that they're unreliable. You're also not putting any sort of statistics as to suicide rates, obesity rates, diabetes rates, depression, anxiety, withdrawnness. How about eyesight effect from watching screens all day long? That's what we're having our children do now, is watch screens all day long. And that's okay, because we're concerned about safety. We're concerned about safety of one thing only, COVID. Not kids killing themselves, not kids that don't know how to communicate, not kids that don't know how to socialize, not kids that have no self-confidence anymore, not kids who are participating in athletics and have worked years and are trying to get college scholarships. We're concerned about the COVID, which the numbers do not support.
99% survival rate for children.
So, no offense, it's kind of atrocious when you say to my friend Crystal that we're not taking questions. You should take questions, and you should be a voice for us. That's what your job is. That's what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Shane Wilson. I have a son here at Central. I'm feeling very jealous of Crystal because she can say that she's never spoken to you before. I have obviously spoken to you more than half a dozen times since last summer. I have not seen members of my extended family in a year. I have not seen coworkers in a year. I have not seen friends in a year, but I've seen you. I would definitely like this to be over. I would definitely like COVID to go away. I would like everyone to be back in school. That is a thing that I would like. Dr. Stawick, I want to thank you for your presentation. I found it very enlightening and very comprehensive. And I suppose that's why I find it striking that so many people are prepared to disregard it. The fact that a 5th change in 12 months to the way that we educate our kids is being proposed, to think that that would not be disruptive, I find that remarkable. Obviously, it would be disruptive to, once again, change how teachers are conducting their classes, to change how students are getting their lessons, to change the kind of lessons. One of the things we didn't mention was this whole rescheduling, this whole shifting kids potentially to another school. I presume that will disrupt advanced classes. I presume that will affect advanced math, advanced ELA. I don't see how it couldn't if you're now ghettoizing this small group of students. We're talking about this simulcasting approach as if it's no different. Clearly it's inferior. We know it's inferior. We know it's inferior because so many people don't want to be on the other end of it. That's just to be understood, that to be on a screen in front of a teacher, presumably to be one small box on a screen in front of a teacher, is to be less considered. And that's not the fault of the student, that's not the fault of the teacher, that's the nature of the beast. You can't have that kind of attention split like that. I appreciate that our first speaker indicated that she was able to make that work successfully, but even in describing it, it sounds like she's not able to give that attention. She's relying on other students to do part of the work, to make sure that everybody can be engaged. When we talk about doing this disruption again, we're talking about doing it primarily in favor of socialization. And I will agree with Mr. Lloyd that lunch is important. But I also agree with Dr. Staywick that to make that lunch happen is to massively prevent socialization. You're not going to have kids closer together unless you're violating guidelines. You're not going to have kids maskless within 6 feet of each other unless you're violating guidelines. So now you're proposing having some students eat lunch at 10:30 and some students eat lunch at 2 in order to accommodate this plan. Are you getting more socialization? Are there metrics that indicate socialization is better when kids are 6 feet apart and masked? When kids have teachers rotating out of the classroom? I'm not convinced that we have better socialization. And when we talk about, well, we can make this enhanced, a lot of the things on that list, Dr. Staywick, that you presented of how to enhance a remote education remain impossible. Well, kids could come into the school for a field day. Well, kids could come into the school for a picture day. Remote kids are remote for a reason, because they're remote. To say we're going to enhance the remote experience by giving them more opportunities to come into the school defeats the purpose of remote. And looking at those numbers that you placed about what parents have already made their decisions for in this school district, more than a third continue to believe that remote is the best option. And so to decide that we should abandon that we should make it a second-class group of students, all for the sake of a socialization that has not been proven in any meaningful way, seems to me an irresponsible disregarding of what the best approach is. I will ask, because again, our first speaker said, you should ask the teachers. Will you ask the teachers? Is this really what they want? The teachers have spoken to you before. Representatives of the union have spoken to this board and said, we have major concerns. Someone today has spoken to you and said, we have concerns about safety. I don't know if you're taking their needs and their concerns into account. Are we even asking the students? Are we actually considering all the people involved in this? Ultimately, the reason we're doing all this is because of COVID. That's absolutely true what Mr. Dorr said. We're doing it because of COVID. And Mr. Staywick's numbers, Dr. Staywick's numbers, show how there's a continued trend. The numbers go up, the numbers go down. What we find is that the numbers go back up whenever we back off. Whenever we stop being safe, whenever we decide, okay, we can sneak a little bit. Okay, we can go from 3 feet to 2 feet. Okay, we don't have to wear masks all the time, or we can wear it underneath our nose. Whenever we back off, the disease comes roaring back. You wouldn't stop putting out a fire because 80% of the building was put out. You wouldn't stop doing chemo because 80% of the cancer was gone. Why we feel that we need 2 more months of kids in the classrooms to take the risk is not sensical to me.
Mr. Wilson, I'm sorry, I got to cut you off.
I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to make a comment?
name is Julie Harris, and I'm the president of the Certified Staff Teachers Union. I don't even know what to say. And I think hopefully we've trained our students and our children to be better listeners and more receptive than some in this room. I usually come up here with a prepared statement that is well thought out and practiced in front of a mirror to make sure it's all good. And I didn't know what to come up here and talk about today. And after hearing the whole conversation, I felt like I just needed to come up here and say something. The teachers in this district want nothing more than to have our kids back. We love our kids. We love what we do. We love our jobs. We never asked to teach during a pandemic. Nobody did. And think about our first-year teachers, those just out of college, and what they walked into, and how they are persevering this year. I'm so proud of the educators of this district for holding their heads high and coming in every single day and doing what's right for kids. But I do want us all to remember why we are here. We are in a pandemic that has cost the lives of 500,000 people in this country. And yes, the numbers are excellent. They're going down. They're good. We're so happy. Teachers are getting vaccinated. We love it. There's no vaccine in sight for children. Children do transmit the virus to each other, and then they bring it home to their parents and their grandparents. I'm a parent of a senior in high school who has missed his entire senior year. He's missed his homecoming. He's not going to have a prom. He's hopefully getting a football season in a month. But we have to teach our kids that this is what happened because we're in a pandemic. There's no other reason why we're doing this. Nobody wants it. We all want to make it better, but we do, and we have to trust in our board. These are elected officials. You guys vote for them. We have to put our trust in them because they are the ones we trust to make the decisions for the teachers and for our students. They're not paid. I think they're very underappreciated. We have to put our trust and our hopes and dreams and everything else on our administration and our school board. And talking about opening up, we all love it. We all want it. We want it safely. And for those of you that think that we can just flip a switch and come back and schools, we're open. It's not going to be like that. We're not going to have lunch the way you envision it. Lunch is spaced out for safety reasons. We may have 3 or 4 eating here, 3 or 4 eating here. It's not the school that we grew up in. We will get there. We will get there one day. But in the meantime, we have to keep ourselves safe. We have to keep our students safe. And we have to keep our family and our community safe. And there's no other way we can do that unless we work together to do it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll try and keep it brief. I know it's been a long night tonight. My
Thank
name's
you.
Erin Pizarnik. I have 2 children in the current district. I have 1 and 2 30. As I said at the last meeting I stood up and spoke at in the summer, early fall, I've seen it on 3 different levels. I think what I've heard throughout the evening is that we're so concerned, as we should be, with the disruption of our children's schedules and how they're going to handle that. And I can appreciate that. However, we have asked them to change their lives multiple times over the last 12 months. They have been the most accommodating little guys, kids, young adults that I've ever run into across the board. So to say that they can't handle one more change, maybe just a little bit to feel a little normal in life, I think that's a complete disregard to their intelligence and their adaptability. It is not going to be a flip of the switch. We're not expecting that. We never did. We respect the teachers and the jobs that they do.
but we also expect the best education possible for our children. They deserve to be in the classroom. They deserve to be socialized, educated, and mentally challenged. And learning from a screen doesn't work. They do the very best they can on both ends, and I appreciate the efforts. But COVID is here to stay. It is never going away. We have to figure out how to make this work. All of us have to figure that out for our kids. Set aside our indifferences, our grievances, our dislikes. If we are truly here for the kids, let's advocate for our children and get them back in school, and do that soon. If we don't have a plan to figure out lunch, to figure out the remote learners, now start working on one for the fall. Because come July, I'm hoping that I'm not getting a survey as to what I want for the start of school in a month. We have to be creative, and I know it can get done. We have a very intelligent group of people willing to work very hard. We have a community of parents that are fighting for their kids. Let's make this happen. I want to see this happen. They deserve it.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hi.
My name's Kim Saraki, and I have 3 children in this district. From the beginning, it was a struggle with the remote, especially with my youngest one being in kindergarten. She is now in hybrid, and they're adjusting, but it's still not enough. And as other parents have said, COVID is not going away. My husband, plus many other people, have been working this entire time. Figure it out. Stop holding our children hostage. Enough is enough. Do we close every cold and flu season when kids get sick? No, kids have germs, people have germs. Wash your hands, change your clothes, common sense. Do what is best for our children. Most of you on the board don't even have kids in this district. Your children are going to school and have been this entire time. The people that want their kids to be remote, that's fine. Let them have that option. But the other parents that need their kids in school full-time because they also work, we should be given that option. And that survey that you're talking about should have been sent out before this meeting. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Thank you. Sure.
I feel as a teacher, I do need to speak for these teachers that are concerned. This year is not what we desire. This is not what we're trained for. This is not what we're equipped for. This is not at all what we anticipated as new teachers, as current teachers, as experienced teachers. But I challenge what we're here for. Why are we here? Why are you teaching in the first place? And if these parents are making it clear that our kids are struggling, then as teachers, we should be compassionate towards finding a solution. Do I think we completely lose all mitigations? Absolutely not. COVID is real. COVID is serious, and it is dangerous. I believe that. I've seen it. I know it. I, as a parent and as a teacher, I do not mitigate that one bit. But our kids have endured more than some of them are capable of. They are broken, and we have to get creative. So we get creative. We do what we need to do. I have faith in this board. That's why I email you. not to disregard your value. I have no envy of where you've been this year. I have no desire to be where you are, right? And I praise those that are willing to come and through all this say, you know what, I'm ready to face it, those that are nominees. This is not good for any situation, and no situation is going to be ideal. It's not going to be. We are in a pandemic. We are in a situation that is dangerous. But where kids are also faltering. So we have to come up with a solution that's going to benefit everyone.
Thank you.
Hi, I am Renee Benedetto. I am a couple of titles, but for this moment, I'm just going to be a teacher at Cruz. And I felt compelled to come up here because I think almost every parent that came up here to speak was from Cruz. And I got several texts from friends who had to turn off the YouTube because of the adverse speeches that came up here. I can speak for lots of people because I do wear many hats in this district, and the teachers are working beyond. We have accommodated beyond. We have driven supplies to people's houses because they can't come pick them up. We have hosted clubs for 50, 60, 70 children, which could never be done if we were in person. We have taken I haven't, but teachers have taken students whose car didn't start in the morning, so they couldn't get to school, so we're just going to go remote that day. And parents who decided to take 7-week vacations, and we're just going to go remote while we're in Florida. And parents whose children were too tired from the Super Bowl party they were at the night before. So we're just going to join the remote session if that's okay. And we've done all of that. And I might sound a little snarky right now, and I don't mean to, but we are accommodating beyond. And to have parents come up here and say that their kids hate it is really, really a blow to all of the teachers who are working so hard. We have changed from in-person teaching to quarantine teaching to remote teaching to hybrid teaching to let me grab this kid for 10 minutes while they're walking in the door teaching in a split second. There's been no training. And now we're going to be asked to move again to a new type of teaching, full in person, but still not the same kind of teaching we used to do, because we still can't have our small groups, and we still can't bring kids to the back table. So we have done a lot. And I just had to get up here because I am so upset that the parents in my community think that teachers have not done enough, that their children hate school so much, and that their social and emotional well-being is at stake, when we have been in contact with parents more than ever before. We have talked to children one-on-one more than ever before, and it is not ideal, and it is not awesome by any means, but the fact that I just felt like we were being thrown down like teachers, staff at Cruz as a whole, paras, administration, even the board has not done everything in their power to make this the best that they can for the children in our community. And I just had to come up here and say that. So thank you for listening.
Would anybody else like to comment? Laura, is there anybody in the overflow? No? Okay, come on up.
Katie Teresi again. That is exactly why I didn't want to comment. And for the teachers watching, this is not to hurt your feelings, it's to advocate for our children. And to be honest, this has pushed me to go private, to go to CJB, because I don't want my first grader to enter a building with now a bias that the parents don't appreciate the teachers. We are not enemies or at war. We are simply trying to advocate. And now I'm thinking that my name is on this paper, that my face is being seen by the teachers, and now my son PJ is gonna have to feel the attitude because the teachers feel hurt. Well, the parents are hurt. The students are hurt. We have to put our feelings aside, and I don't know how we come to a conclusion, but it is not, I am saying this from the bottom of my heart, it is not disrespect to the teachers. I know you are working your butt off. I am an educator myself, and the challenges are insane. And I don't know, maybe it's lack of communication, maybe it's, we have to figure it out, and that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Katie.
If I could circle back too. So that was super upsetting to me, and I just want to say to the virtual world that I am beyond appreciative of our staff at Cruz. Every single one of the teachers there are absolutely amazing, and my kids would be far worse. AJ Pavlovsky and Ava Pavlovsky would be in a far worse situation right now if it wasn't for Mrs. Knapp, my daughter's first grade teacher, and Mrs. Drew, my son's fifth grade teacher, and Mr. Molinay and Mr. Rojas, who have done an amazing job trying to engage kids in specials via a teeny tiny internet screen. We're doing scavenger hunts in our homes. They are doing absolutely everything they can do to engage the kids. This is 100% not about the dedication of the teachers at Cruz specifically. And please, I hope everybody hears that loud and clear. I appreciate every one of them. I appreciate Mrs. Hartnett. I appreciate Mrs. Radke. What I don't appreciate is that our schools right now are the only place where there isn't some semblance of normalcy. Like one of the other moms said, I have to go to work every day. My husband has to go to work every day. I'm sure all of you are at Target. You go to the grocery store. You go out to dinner. And sure, we're all doing things differently, but most of us that are not teachers don't have the option to not show up and do our jobs. Healthcare workers have to show up and do their jobs. Nobody wants to do their job in a pandemic. Absolutely nobody. But the fact that the teachers have a choice by whatever acronym thing you advise, Dr. Stawick, that they have the option to get an accommodation, I'd like an accommodation too, because I have to try to work and mitigate and manage my kids every day. Drop them off for 2.5 hours, pick them up, get their school supplies, make sure their electronics are charged, figure out what to do with them in 1.5 hours of their lunch break, and try to keep them off their personal screens and their personal computers and not watch TV or play Roblox and Fortnite in the middle of what should be a school day, because we've got teachers who have the option to stay home because of a unionized system that isn't the reality for the majority of working people in America. So while I appreciate Mrs. Benedetto, who I personally but I know of her, to feel so offended by this group of parents who's really come here to cry out for our own sanity and the sanity of our children, who are forced into this situation just like the rest of us. But we have got to do better as a community. We've got private schools that are 100% in person. We've got Palos Heights, District 128, that's been in person the entire time. I don't think that we should be just thinking now at this juncture with 4 months left of the school year of which flavor of ice cream we're gonna choose from the 4 options on the screen. This should have been an opportunity to figure this out prior, and please, excuse me 1 second. I just wanna say that this is not about disdain for our teachers who are in school working their butts off every single day, and the paras. This whole section of people just left because they don't want to hear what parents have to say. And that's exactly how I think all of us have felt this entire time, that we are not being heard.
Thank you. I know it's a very difficult time, and it's very emotional, and it's hard. Everyone's right. We all need to get along and figure this out, and we will. We're all doing our best, and hopefully we'll get back to normal really soon. Is there anybody else that would like to comment that hasn't commented before? Okay, could I have a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Second.
Secretary, call the roll.
Aiello?
Yes.
Barry, yes. Casper?
Yes.
Jackson?
Yes.
Lloyd?
Yes.
Nenza?
Yes.
Malloy?
Yes. Thank you all for coming out. We are adjourned.